All India Vice President, National Secretary member, Robilal Moitro. He has already sent us a video of that for the inauguration part of today's session. I'll just share the screen to everyone.
Today's subject is independence of judiciary in India during COVID-19. I am just introducing the subject and elaborately it will be delivered, it will be said by Comrade P.V. Surendranath, our Joint Secretary of All India Organization. The judiciary has been assigned the role of determining powers of every constitutional organ as also the rights of individuals. The observation and view expressed by the apex court is that independence of judiciary is part of basic structure of constitution. Independence of judiciary is integral to the entire scheme of the constitution, without which neither primacy of the constitution nor federal character, social democracy, nor rights of equality and liberty can be effected. We are concerned with today's topic about independence of judiciary during COVID-19, and during lockdown period, various petitions were filed before the Supreme Court by social activists with a prayer to allow the migrant workers to return their native place. But Supreme Court did not pass any specific order directing the central or state functionaries to take necessary action in this regard. Across India, lakhs of migrant workers whose livelihood devastated by the nationwide lockdown, and it was observed that lakhs of migrant people are working hundreds of kilometers to get back to their home village. Approximately 120 of them have died along the way. While the center mounted a massive mission titled Vande Bharat to bring back Indian stranded overseas, it has not shown the same zeal in bringing back those poor workers to their home. So it has come as no surprise that several activists and lawyers has approached the Supreme Court over the last few weeks to help the migrant workers, urging to help the migrant workers. They expected the court to act as the sentinel of the rights of the workers, but it has fared poorly, accepting the government's submission almost mechanically, not doing much to alleviate the sufferings of the workers. Strange enough, Chief Justice S.A. Bobde asked the lawyers why the workers need money when they are being fed, which is not substantially correct, and failing to acknowledge that people need more than just food to survive themselves. Court all time accepted the center's submission and passed no fruitful orders for the migrants workers. Even court expressed its view that it was impossible for courts to monitor or stop the movement of migrant workers across the country. The court's decision not to intervene had led to widespread criticism in the country. On May 25 night, the day before the court finally took a stand, a group of senior advocates had written to Chief Justice of India and other judges of the Supreme Court, detailing why it was so important for the court to intervene in this case. The deference shown by the Honorable Supreme Court to the government's blunt assertions and the expressed helplessness of the Supreme Court on the ground that issues being policy decisions or inability to monitor in the face of an unfolding human disaster where millions of migrant workers are on the road working thousands of kilometers to reach their homes, whether it is a matter of involving the violation of fundamental rights of millions of our poor citizens on account of executive action that needs urgent attention on its judicial side, it was then Supreme Court intervened in the matter. In conclusion, I can say, which will be apart from what will be expressed by our General Secretary P.V. Surendranath, that Supreme Court has failed, it is my observation, the Supreme Court has failed to protect the fundamental rights of these millions poor migrant workers to life and liberty and right to move freely and to return home with safety and dignity guaranteed under Article 14, 19, 1 and 21 of the Constitution. If the court is to fulfill its sacred constitutional role and duty, it must hold the executive accountable and require it to take steps to fulfill its obligations under the Constitution. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Rovilal Moitra, our National Secretariat member, Vice President, and I would straightway request our All India Lawyers Union General Secretary, Senior Advocate of Supreme Court, P.V. Surendranath, to start with his today's session on independence of judiciary in India during COVID-19. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Rovilal Moitra ji. Thank you, Somaji. Dear friends, privileged to address you on independence of judiciary during this lockdown period. Let me congratulate All India Lawyers Union West Bengal State Committee, the student chapter, for arranging this very creative and rejuvenating program. I have been observing the activities of this committee eagerly. It is in this chapter has been conducting classes on vital subjects, academic as well as professional, during this period. Dear friends, this itself is a missionary activity in fighting COVID-19. Education is a social process, there's a social asset. Ours is a knowledge society, and knowledge is power. Hence, sharing of knowledge is a missionary activity. Dear friends, today I intend to deal with the position, scope, and relevance of judiciary in India as an independent constitutional institution and its accountability. Of course, I should deal with the subject generally. Otherwise, we may not be able to do justice to today's particular subject, that is independent judiciary during the COVID-19 lockdown period. Other aspects of judiciary, such as its ideological metamorphosis in this era of globalization, tool or social engineering, etc., are by themselves vital subjects that could be dealt separately and independently on another occasion. When we ponder over or speak about judiciary, we can't leave the subject without touching upon what exactly is democracy. when we say about democracy and democratic government in India, we know of three limbs of our government, that is legislature, executive, and judicial. Of course, we know something more, that is separation of powers. We know, dear friends, that is periodic election or formation of government by the political party or group which has got majority in the legislative assembly or the parliament, and the supremacy of the legislature are salient features of parliamentary democracy. But democracy is more than periodic election and legislative supremacy. This is only formal aspect of democracy. It has got more important substantive contents such as secularism, equality, tolerance, reasonableness, rationality, good faith, public order, and justice. It is not a complete list. These are the main components of democracy, according to me. Above all, democracy cannot exist without the protection of civic rights and persons' basic human rights. That rights so essential that they must be insulated from the power of the majority. If the democracy is only periodic election and formation of government by majority, it can lead to fascism through the very same democratic process. In that even it would be a tyranny of majority. Illustration and examples are plenty in history. So when there is conflict between the aforesaid formal aspects and the substantial content of the democracy, there should be an independent, impartial institution or authority for resolution of the conflict. When the formal aspect of democracy, that is the government formed as the majority based on the supremacy of the legislature, violates the substantial aspects of democracy, that is secularism, equality, tolerance, reasonableness, rationality, good faith, etc., etc., there should be an impartial, independent authority to scrutinize and review the actions of the government as well as legislature. And these actions of the executive or the legislature are in conflict with the substantial contents of the democracy, those actions and even if legislation is passed by the majority should be set aside. And this authority is judicial. The substantial aspects of democracy, as I mentioned earlier, cannot be left in abstract form. It should be in concrete, referable form. And that concrete, referable form is the basic document for the guidance of the government, and we call it as Constitution. So Constitution is the supreme law of the land. To say in simple practical terms, illustrations are required. Let us see a situation. Suppose after election, the political party or group which has got a brute majority in the parliament passes a law which denies voting right to a particular religion, members of a particular religion or community, or abolishing the periodic election itself, or changing the form of government from parliamentary democracy to presidential form, it should be the end of democracy. Though process is through a democracy. If we accept the legislative supremacy of the parliament as the last word in democracy, it will be the death of democracy itself. If the law passed by the majority is against the core principles of democracy and enshrined in the Constitution, it is a duty of the judiciary to examine the legality of the law with the reference to the Constitution and set aside accordingly. This is applicable to the actions of the executive. Here comes the most vital aspects of judiciary, that is independence and accountability. This is more important in the present context and situation because when the ideology of the political party or the government in office is in conflict with the core principle and idea of our Constitution, the responsibility and duty of the judiciary is more important, and it should be more vigilant in that context. Let us see certain situations in concrete form. The actions and conduct of the Modi regime illustrate one of that situations. Its inherent contradictions with the principles of the Constitution have come up glaringly after the election. Election was conducted based on secular Constitution, but after the election, the leaders of the government and the BJP started campaigning against secularism, despite the fact that it is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Here lies the relevance and scope of judiciary as an independent, impartial authority. If the judiciary is not independent and impartial, and if it is not prepared to intervene, interfere, and set at naught the actions of the executive or the legislature, if the law passed by the legislature, even if by brute majority or unanimously, but against secularism, it should be set at naught by the judiciary. If the judiciary failed to do that, it will be not only the death of judiciary, but also the death of democracy. Dear friends, as the judiciary is charged with the solemn duty of upholding the fundamental rights of the people and preventing legal injury to them, the independence of judiciary is the high guarantee under our Constitution for attaining the constitutional goals, and the goals are in the preamble: a democratic, socialist, secular Republic of India. That's why we always restate and reassert that independence of judges as persons and judiciary as an institution means not only to decide the cases courageously and independently without external pressure from the executive or the legislature. It is something more. It should be accountable to the people of India with a reference to Constitution. So there should be a burning passion for the philosophy and ideals of the Constitution: secularism, liberty, freedom, secularism, socialism, etc. If a person who till yesterday preached and campaigned against secularism or socialism shall not have a place in the judiciary, he shall not be selected and appointed as a judge of the Constitutional Court. How to maintain independence and accountability of the judiciary is a big question. If the executive or the judiciary alone are given the exclusive power of selection and appointment of the judges to the High Courts and Supreme Court, it will not facilitate independence and accountability of the judiciary. The present system of collegium is totally non-transparent, undemocratic. The present system of collegium is totally non-transparent, undemocratic, and incapable of preventing nepotism and bias. This is why All India Lawyers Union and all other right-thinking democratic citizens and institutions from all walks of life have been campaigning for a National Judicial Commission as an independent, impartial body for selection and appointment of the judges of the constitutional courts, that is High Courts as well as Supreme Court. This Corona lockdown period is quite unprecedented in the history of India, and more particularly judicial history of India. Rubilal Moitraji has referred to it in detail with a particular reference to certain cases came up before the Supreme Court and the failure on the part of the Supreme Court in properly addressing the issues in a constitutional way. So my effort will be, or my work is a little bit reduced by his great effort. So I need not say each and every cases. The central government ordered complete lockdown of India from 24/3/2020 without sufficient notice or giving breathing time to people of India to plan their life during the Corona period in a manageable manner. This has been done even without proper consultation with state government. Whether the central government has got power to do so is a debatable issue. It is nobody's case that there should not have been lockdown ordered for combating COVID-19. The point is that due to this unilateral action without sufficient planning, the most affected groups are migrant laborers and other daily earning laborers. Their livelihood is totally devastated. They were stranded in various parts of India in highly unhealthy situations without proper accommodation or amenities, so had to comply the medical norms to protect themselves from the COVID infection, and it spread. As the entire transport facilities were stopped all of a sudden, and travel itself was banned, literally their lives were in peril, and all rights under Article 21 of the Constitution of India were practically denied to them. Despite all claims of central government as well as various state governments regarding action taken to protect migrant laborers and other daily earning laborers, they were suffering even without anything to protect basic human rights. Unfortunately, at this point of time, though bills have been filed before the Honorable Supreme Court by various responsible persons and institutions, as rightly pointed out by Rabilal Moitra, the Supreme Court took the position that the executive government is the proper and competent authority to deal with the situation, accepting the version of the government that they have been doing all necessary things for protecting migrant laborers and others. But at the same time, various high courts, including High Court of Gujarat, have tried to do something to protect these suffering lot and for effective management of corona, medically or otherwise. High Court of Gujarat in that process has made certain scathing observations against Gujarat government with respect to corona management, hospital facility, etc. But the Supreme Court failed to note one important aspect at that crucial point of time. The content of Article 21 is not at all in negative terms. It has got a positive content and it has given power and authority to the Supreme Court as well as the High Courts. Not only power and authority, duty is cast upon the constitutional courts to intervene in such situations and pass affirmative actions, affirmative orders to protect the livelihood or all other aspects of right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution. Yeah. Of course, it is the duty of the courts, the constitutional courts, to see that whether the tall claims made by the executive government that they have been doing or they are doing all possible things in favor of those suffering lot, it is the duty of the constitutional court to scrutinize that so-called claims. They just can't simply accept the version of the executive and say that the best competent, suitable authority is the executive government and the court. The court's duty is not simply give directions. They have to scrutinize whether the claim made by the executive government is in effect doing some consolation in compliance of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. If they fail in that duty, that is a violation of the concept of independence of judiciary. It is not only a simple dereliction of duty, it is a clear violation of the concept of independence of judiciary. Dear friends, we all knew that what happened subsequently. There have been serious criticism against the approach of the Supreme Court in non-intervening in the matter at the appropriate time when serious violation of right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution of India was pointed out before the Supreme Court. Number of senior lawyers and responsible citizens directly wrote letters to Supreme Court highlighting pathetic situation of the migrant laborers and other marginalized groups. Though late Supreme Court initiated suo motu proceedings in the matter of migrant laborers, of course, too late and too little, the approach of the executive government before the Supreme Court was highly or most unbecoming of the so-called benign welfare government. Before the Supreme Court, the Solicitor General of India was making aspersions against the High Court saying blindly that high courts are behaving as a parallel government. That is a clear imputation of politics on the High Court. The unfortunate part is that Supreme Court did not criticize, or I say otherwise. It is unfortunate that Supreme Court permitted Solicitor General to make such submissions before the Supreme Court. That's very unfortunate, and it is most unbecoming of Solicitor General. Not only that, he has insulted lawyers and institutions who have been approaching the Supreme Court, highlighting the situation of migrant laborers and other marginalized groups. They were insulted, saying that, no, these are all pill manufacturing factories, and of course, publicity mongers. And ultimately, though late, when the Supreme Court suo motu initiated the proceedings and intervened, though too little, that illustrates one important thing. What is that? That the tall claim of the executive government that they have been doing all possible things in compliance of Article 21 towards, or in the matter of COVID management, in the matter of treating doctors and other health workers, is utter nonsense. And even now, Supreme Court has been issuing directions in the matter of medical doctors and other health workers, and that the matter of migrant laborers is not yet closed. Of course, the directions now issued are too little. That is only regarding transportation of all intending migrant laborers. It should be completed within 15 days, and that migrant laborers shall not be compelled to pay. The transportation charges shall be paid by state government, either sharing with the destination state government and all that. But this shows one more important aspect. The delay in intervening the matter at the appropriate time has compounded the situation. If intervention was at the appropriate time, even the COVID spread could have been reduced. Because now, by the time we allowed these migrant laborers to travel to their home village, many of them caught this COVID. If at the time that directions were given, we could have transported them without COVID infection, and that could have saved a lot of life in those villages. So that is the unfortunate situation. So I need not emphasize with more concrete facts regarding the independence of judiciary during the COVID period, because this is a stark reality. But we have to appreciate one fact, whether it is due to intervention by responsible institutions, NGOs, lawyers, senior lawyers, and otherwise, though too late, Supreme Court intervened. That shows the yesterday's view that we are not the proper authority to give directions at this juncture was a wrong approach. And that is the state of independence of judiciary. So, dear friends, Another aspect of independence judiciary, I wish to make reference to that also. It seems that the Modi regime has been perfecting an art of taming the judiciary by interfering with its independence, by appeasement, browbeating, surveillance, and harassment. The nomination of Justice Ranjan Gogoi to Rajya Sabha is latest of his ploy in this regard. It is yet another fatal jolt to Indian judiciary made by Modi regime. It not only affects credibility, integrity, independence, and public faith of the judiciary, public faith and confidence in it, but also reflects the present nature, position, and stature of the judiciary. Our nomination of Justice Gogoi to Rajya Sabha, everybody of course already stated that, is a brazen violation of independence of the judiciary from within and without. Justice Gogoi demitted the office of the Chief Justice of India only on 17th September 2019 on superannuation. His period as Chief Justice of India was arguably the most controversial period. It has been widely perceived that Supreme Court could not discharge its functions and play the role as protector of fundamental rights and civil rights during his period. It has been illustrated by various informed, erudite former judges, academics, and statesmen with reference to issues and cases that came up before Supreme Court. These cases, of course, plenty. Kashmir issue, a Rafale case, Assam NRC matter, Ayodhya case, Sabarimala repetition, etc. But at the same time, there has been widespread, well-informed criticism that the executive was overprotected by its actions, inactions, and omissions during the same period. The curious aspect of this particular episode of Gogoi is that it is on record that Justice Gogoi himself said on many occasions against this after retirement post. He said in one of his judgments, I may simply quote it, there is viewpoint that post-retirement appointment itself is a scar on independence of judiciary. This is a statement in the judgment passed by Justice Gogoi. That is, while dealing with appointment of member tribunals, the Constitutional Bench presided over by Justice Gogoi was striking down provisions in the tribunal's rules which enabled reappointment of tribunal members after retirement. At that time, he observed the observations like this: the provision for reappointment would undermine the independence of members who presumably be constrained to decide matters in a manner that would ensure the reappointment. He further observed the discretion accorded to the central or state government to reappoint members after retirement from one tribunal to another discourages public faith in justice dispensation system. It increases interference by the executive, jeopardizing the independence of judiciary. So this was the observations made by Justice Gogoi while dealing with reappointment of tribunal members. The present situation of nomination of Justice Gogoi to Rajya Sabha is something worse because it is not a judicial post. But dear friends, of course, in India, so far there is no rule barring appointments of judges as members of various tribunals. Whereas such enactments forming the tribunal prescribe that the presiding officer should be a retired High Court judge or a retired Supreme Court judge. On this aspect, BJP leader and former Law Minister late Arun Jaitley himself observed, his observations I am quoting: the desire of a post-retirement job influences pre-retirement judgments. It is a threat to the independence of judiciary, and once it influences pre-retirement judgments, it adversely impacts on functioning of the judiciary. So, dear friends, by the same standard, nobody can resist the criticism that the nomination of Justice Gogoi to Rajya Sabha, which is a political office and not a judicial post, would affect independence of judiciary. This is more damaging than appointing in any other judicial post in a tribunal. And of course, Justice Gogoi as CJ of India, in cases such as Ayodhya and Rafe, where all the judgments were in favor of the government. And nomination to Rajya Sabha is made by the Modi regime with the consent of Justice Gogoi. We cannot presume otherwise. We can only presume that way, and of course Justice Gogoi admitted that fact. In that event, the importance of this situation compounds. He should not have consented for the proposal in deference to the independence of judiciary and the principle that justice shall not only be done but shall also be seen to be done. And you know that this is Gogoi issue is not an isolated incident at all. Former CJ of India, Justice P. Sadashivam, he retired from office on 26 April 2014. But immediately after that, he was appointed as Governor of Kerala in the month of August 2014 itself by the Modi regime. There was not a cooling period, even some months. So there are widespread criticism that when certain judges for their orders in favor of executives are rewarded, and judges whose judgments are not palatable to the Modi regime are harassed in all possible ways and means. Let us see some illustrated cases. The recommendation of the Supreme Court Collegium for elevation of Justice K.M. Joseph, who scrapped the presidential rule in the state of Uttarakhand in the year 2016, was subjected to by the Modi regime, citing invalid and unsustainable grounds. Then, even after reiteration of accommodation by the Supreme Court Collegium, headed by then Chief Justice Deepak Mishra, the Modi regime protracted and delayed its appointment for further about 8 months. Justice Akhil Ahmed Qureshi, who was a judge of Gujarat High Court, he happened to rule against Amit Shah in one of the cases. He was initially recommended by the Collegium as Chief Justice of High Court of Madhya Pradesh, but the central government objected to it in the month of September 2019. Then the Supreme Court Collegium, headed by then CJI, Mr. Ranjan Gogoi modified the recommendation and recommended Justice Qureshi for appointment as Chief Justice of High Court of Tripura. This itself is reflection of violation of independence of judiciary from within and without. In the meanwhile, vacancy of Chief Justice occurred in the High Court of Gujarat itself. And we know, as per convention, the senior most superior judge will be nominated as acting Chief Justice. But that convention was not followed. He was not initially nominated during that period as acting Chief Justice of that High Court. He was made acting Chief Justice of Gujarat only later, after a lot of criticism from the judiciary, from the civic society, from lawyers, and all that. And thing is that even after modified recommendation of the Supreme Court Collegium for appointing Justice Qureshi as Chief Justice of High Court of Tripura, central government delayed the matter further. And we know the episode of Justice Vijaya Tahilramani, Chief Justice of Madras High Court. She was transferred to High Court from Meghalaya. She had to put in her papers on rejection of her appeal for reconsideration of her transfer. And she made a dignified exit from the judiciary. Of late, Dr. Justice Muralidhar, who had passed the peremptory orders for emergent and prompt treatment of victims of Delhi riots, so recent issue, and arranging ambulance services and free passage of the same in a public interest litigation, and made strong observations in the order for prompt registration of FIRs against hate speeches of Mr. Anurag Thakur, Minister for State for Finance, Union of India, Mr. Kapil Mishra, a former MLA and BJP leader. That Justice Muralidhar has been transferred, issuing notification overnight on 26 February 2020, when the case I referred to was posted to 27 February for further orders. Though recommendation of transfer was 2 weeks before, the notification was issued overnight and transferred on 26th night itself. And the funny and frightening situation is coming later. It is a certain observation, a statement made by BJP MP Meenakshi Lekhi. It shows the judges of the High Courts and Supreme Courts have been under surveillance by the executive by way of selective and tailored IB reports. That's only conclusion we can get from the empirical facts in the public domain. Referring to and justifying Dr. Muralidhar's transfer, Meenakshi Lekhi MP stated in the parliament. What is that? The statement is like this: IB reports of some persons should be published. Then people will know who was transferred and for what reason. So this shows that she is privy to such reports. Otherwise, how can she say so? So this is nothing but violent interference with independence of judiciary as an institution and individual judges as persons. And of course, you know, another honorable sitting Supreme Court judge recently praised our Prime Minister in public function as an international acclaimed visionary, calling him a versatile genius. Not only that, a versatile genius who thinks globally and acts locally. this sort of eulogizing Prime Minister or any other leading persons in the executive in adulatory terms by a sitting of the Supreme Court of India will necessarily cause shaking of independence of the judiciary and shaking of confidence of people in the judiciary. So this is against their own acclaimed principle, the principle of judicial conduct restated by Judges Conference, known as Bangalore Principle. It mandates that a judge shall ensure that his or her conduct in and out of court maintains and enhances the confidence of the people, the legal profession, and the litigants in the impartiality of the judge and the judiciary. So, you may ponder over it. Such a statement was made by a sitting judge at a time when very important matters of constitutional challenges involved are pending before the Supreme Court, such as Kashmir issue, citizenship amendment, that is CAA, etc. The aforesaid illustrative incidents, dear friends, just now I mentioned, would amplify the reasons for demand for appropriate constitutional amendment to bring about an impartial, independent constitutional body, National Judicial Commission, for a selection and appointment of the judges of the High Courts and Supreme Court. It should be an independent representative body with a constitutional status and comprehensive powers for selection of judges. Not only that, that body must have power to investigate or inquire into the misconduct and misdemeanors of judges of the constitutional courts. And it should have the power for transfer of judges as well. And for the present, there is no policy in making transfer of judges of the high courts. It is on record. Justice Salmeshwar, former judge of the Supreme Court, has made serious observation regarding transfer. He said that there is no such policy. And not only that, it was an opaque proceedings. Non-transparency is the mark, and nobody keeps any minutes of it. Nobody knows on what ground particular judges transferred and from where the suggestion came, nothing. If the executive government wants transfer a particular judge, he may simply say orally to particular judge or the CJ himself, but nothing is on minute. So that is the present state of, or the so-called policy or lack of policy in the matter of transferring of judges. That itself is an instrument or a tool to violate independence of judiciary. So that's why, dear friends, all the stakeholders of justice delivery system have been campaigning for an independent institution with the comprehensive powers for selection and appointment, to inquire into misdemeanor, and the matter of transfer. All the stakeholders of justice delivery system, the judiciary, executive, legislature, and the Indian bar and civil society shall have representation or roles in that process. The earlier attempt for bringing about a National Judicial Appointment Commission, though with limitations, was set aside by the Supreme Court, but that is not a ground not to introduce appropriate constitutional amendment rectifying the mistake. But the government is not willing to bring in a perfect National Judicial Commission by making required legitimate amendments to the constitution. The reason is obvious. It seems that now the executive government of late realized that it is easier to deal with the collegium than to involve in National Judicial Commission as an independent mechanism for pushing their own candidates as judges of the High Courts and Supreme Court and violate independence of judiciary. They realize this now. That is the point. They now realize that it is better to follow the present collegium system so that they can easily push their candidates, and to bring about National Judicial Commission will not be beneficial to pursue their agenda. So this is the present status of Indian judiciary vis-a-vis independence of judiciary. But dear friends, I may make a word of caution. Ultimately, we should keep in mind the principle and the political economy. Keep in mind the principle that the political economy is the basis, and all institutions, including judiciary, are only superstructures. India is a capitalist country, though the preamble say it is a socialist country. The parliamentary democracy, the formal aspect and the content of the democracy are in conflict. Though there is a formal democracy, there is no social democracy and economic democracy. That's why we say India is still a capitalist country, and judiciary will not bring about socialism, that constitutional goal. They cannot, they are incapable of doing that. And don't expect too much from the judiciary to attain the constitutional goal of a socialist India. But point is something different. The point is that a judiciary is not with relative autonomy. There is relative autonomy, though minimal, though little. So, however limited, we have to respect, we have to make use of that relative autonomy. And its relevance for protecting our fundamental rights, democracy, and the very constitution shall not be underestimated. And that is why we should be concerned about its independence and accountability. And that is why All India Law Union has been campaigning for this independent National Judicial Commission. And we are proud that we are the pioneers in that campaign. Initially, when we projected that idea, nobody supported that. There was no takers at all. Now, barring one or two political parties, all right-thinking political parties and persons and institutions, intelligentsia, academic, professional lawyers, all are now for an independent institution. Whatever be the name you give, there should be an independent body with a comprehensive powers for selection, appointment, for inquiring into misdemeanor, misconduct, and transfer. So this should be our plan for dissipating this idea when we say about independence of judiciary. So let me once again thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This student chapter of All India Lawyers Union West Bengal Committee and all the organizers, activists. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. First question I'm taking is that, is it constitutional to take away the right of free movement of citizens without imposing of emergency under Article 352?
You cannot take away the right of movement in absolute terms, but you can regulate when the medical emergency is there. But similar situations there with COVID management, when that what is the name of the act?
Disaster Management, sir?
Disaster Management Act. But fifthly, whether there should be violation of fundamental rights, particularly Article 21, coupled with the right to movement, is a question, and that question is now mooted before the Supreme Court in a repetition, because even in that Disaster Management Act, central government can't unilaterally pass orders. They should respect our basic concept of federalism. There's a separate body for that executive committee of that management. Without discussing that body, central government can't unilaterally do that. So in abstract terms, we can say that a total ban of movement is against the constitution.
Thank you, sir. Next question is, sir, how to ensure independence of judiciary in the atmosphere of interdependence that exists between the organs of the government? A basic question.
No, that exactly. Without independence, even that interdependence cannot be a positive concept. Our concept of separation of powers is not a watertight compartment. There is checks and balance. In certain area, it is checks and balance. In certain area, you can have 90% separation of powers. In certain area, there will be limited, but still the independent judiciary is paramount and above all these things. To maintain that, definitely there should be an independent body. That is our concept. Originally, of course, the concept of selection and appointment of Supreme Court judges as High Court judges, it is in the Constitution. It is in the Constitution. So point is, how far empirically when you can look into how far it maintained the independence. To an extent, in the earlier period, there was a semblance of independence because such as statesmen like Supreme Court judges and statesmen executive leaders. But over a period, when we reaches the pinnacle of power of Indira Gandhi, it started eroding. That's why all political parties, including we people, campaigned for change of that system. That's why when that collegium system came, at that time, we also thought that, of course, it is positive, they can deliver something positive with regard to independence of judiciary. But it happened otherwise. That's why we realized that no, it won't work. Definitely, there should be an independent body. That independent body shall have representation from all walks of life. We are campaigning for representation from bar as well as civil society. Not only executive sharing of power between executive and judiciary. And not only that, it cannot be a judicial autocracy, dominance of judiciary for executive autocracy. It cannot be either way. So, despite independence of three pillars, that executive, judicial, legislature, still we can have independent judiciary in practical terms.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, kindly enlighten on your take on suo motu case on ill treatment of COVID-19 patients and of decent burial.
In Gujarat High Court, one fact I omitted. In Gujarat High Court, a bench was initiating proceedings, giving directions, calling for report from executive government, especially from health department regarding COVID management in medical colleges and hospitals. That bench made strong comments and of course justified comments on available facts. Against that, referring to that, not with particular reference to the name of the judge or that order, Solicitor General made observations and comments while submitting before Supreme Court that certain high courts are behaving like parallel governments. We all know that with the reference to that high court itself. The funny thing had to happen, curious and funny thing happened subsequently. The other day, the portfolio of the Gujarat High Court changed. And that particular matter was heard by another bench. Of course, the judge was there as a junior member, the presiding, not presiding that is. So, what is this signal given to the people at large? The wrong signal. Signal is that we can do things. Is it not violation of independence of judiciary? Of course, technically we know that. It is the prerogative of the Chief Justice to change the rostrum, of course. But we have to understand all this in the context, whether it is intended or not. It is that justice shall not be, not only it shall be done, it shall also seem to be done. What is the position with respect to this case? The people will think that yes, executive government can do certain things. That is the reference. That is the point to be referred when we say about this particular case.
Okay. Thank you, sir. The last question I'll take. Sir, all we know, instead of knowing the fact that she is pregnant, the court are not granting bail to the JMU student and CAA protester, Safura Zargar, though there is no such strong evidence against her. Even recently, some of the honorable judges of High Court have been transferred as they made some judgment against the government establishment. Even the series of incidents before and after the retirement of Honorable Justice Gogoi and Ajitha judgment made a huge controversy. Then what is the remedy for us to get justice?
That's a platinum question. Should be alert, be lawyers. We lawyers have a duty not only to contest case for law advocate, clients. We've got a public duty. Be alert, make alert fellow citizens, law students. That's why I used to say, my expectation, hope is not with the present generation, the coming up generation. See that CAA protest during that time, without any regard to political party and political color of the organization, those students against whom we allege that they are apolitical, they have no interest in public affairs and all that, they came up in large. And that shows they have got a sense of democracy. It is our duty to refine that sense, sensitize more, sensitize effectively and positively, and make them politically positive citizens of India. And if that situation is emerging, of course, there is hope. Judiciary will be saved if they are so alert.
Thank you, sir. Arindam Bhattacharya, I request our secretary, AILU West Bengal, to say a few words about this entire series of live webinars.
I congratulate my friend and our General Secretary, P.V. Surendranath. Very nicely he placed his in the webinar, and the interaction session is very nice also. I congratulate all the participants, precisely the students, more than 150 from our state and some of them from our other state, and our state secretariat member, all of the state secretariat member who participated, many of the state secretariat member who participated here, some of the intellectuals, frontliner, left-wing intellectuals of our state, they participated here. I congratulate everybody. I say precisely one or two issues. First of all, perhaps I corrected Somo. To my mind, that girl is a research scholar of not JNU, but he is a research scholar of, who is arrested in a advanced stage of pregnancy. And
JNU.
he's, no, he is the Jamia Millia. He's the
Jamia Millia,
research-
JMU.
JMU. He's a research scholar of Jamia, and her dedication is in an optimum limit. Not only she, other 10 to 15 lawyers, professors, all are under the UAPA. And we, the organization, under the leadership of National Secretariat and our General Secretary, every day in the lockdown period, done a lot through social media and others. We protest, our organization, All India Lawyers Union, protest of the unconstitutional and draconian changes in the labor laws against the workers' interest in violation of human rights by way of ordinances, executive order, and otherwise, and total privatization of PSU, public sector undertaking, and the corporatization of agriculture. In this 3 months, in very new form, under the leadership of PV, we protest throughout our country against this. Secondly, continuing, we condemn the action of the central government and the police. Action of the central government and the police. NIA registers FIR against student and activist, invoking the section 124A of the IPC and provision of UAPA, and arresting them without any legal basis, when the fascist central government, 7 fascist central government, entire nation is fighting against COVID-19. This is the present scenario and role of the AILU, brave role of the AILU, brave role of the National Council, National Secretariat, and National General Secretary all over the country.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.